That morning, as Jack opened up the carton of milk in the refrigerator to pour into his son's bowl of cereal, he found out that the milk had curdled. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he imagined his Nana telling him that curdled milk was a bad omen, and he laughed silently. He really missed the woman. He had not seen her in 3 months because his schedule at work had been crazy, and he could never get the opportunity to get away from work and take a flight all the way over to Spring Valley, Nevada to see her. His son began to get impatient waiting for his breakfast, so he poured out the spoiled milk into the sink and picked up another carton of milk from the refrigerator while praying silently that it should not be spoiled like the first one. It was not. He made a bowl of cereal for his son, Liam, and while the boy was eating, he hurriedly took a shower and got dressed in a pair of black slacks and a powder blue shirt. He put on his tie, wore his signature perfume, and grabbed his car keys from the dresser in the bedroom. In the kitchen, his son had somehow tipped over the bowl of cereal and was currently covered in milk from chest to toe. Jack almost groaned out loud in frustration. He was running late for work, and Lord knew his boss was not going to take it lightly with him if he showed up late for work the third time that week. He quickly took Liam back to his room, undressed and cleaned the boy up, then dressed him in something different and picked up his backpack to take him to school. He checked the time. He still had 30 minutes to spare. He hurried the boy out of his bedroom and toward the apartment door, while calculating how he was going to drop him off at school and make it to his office across town in 30 minutes. Liam, on the other hand, had other pressing issues, such as the fact that his breakfast went on him and not in him. So he had told his dad that he was still hungry and wanted to eat cereal. Again, Jack resisted the urge to groan out loud. Instead, he quickly made a small bowl of cereal and stood by the side as he watched Liam slowly eat his breakfast. When he was done, Jack hurried out of the apartment door to the elevators and down to the garage where his blue BMW convertible rested. Within seconds, Liam was fully strapped in the back seat, and Jack was behind the wheel. Liam's school was just around the corner from their apartment, so it did not take him long to drop the boy off at school, kissed him goodbye, and begin to drive to his workplace. He had still a few minutes to spare, but when he got to his office, he was 10 minutes late. He knew he was doomed. Jack worked in an architectural firm that was owned by his wife's father, Mr. Fitzgerald. The Fitzgerald was one of the wealthiest families in Boston, with a couple of businesses under their belt. Real estate, architecture, advertising, fashion, you name it, and they were in it. His wife's older brother, Leo, owned a chain of restaurants in the city, and her younger sister, Sophie, was in charge of the family's real estate company. But Jack's wife, Chloe, was a prima donna. She hated to work. She spent her days sitting in the salons, visiting spas, and taking vacations every other weekend. She and Jack met 2 years ago at his brother's gym, where he helped out while awaiting interviews from the various firms to which he had submitted his resume. Lazy as she was, Chloe was still a sight to behold. Even when she was sweaty and her hair stuck to her face, Jack still found himself attracted to her. His brother Oliver had guffawed in his face when he told him that he was insanely attracted to Chloe. Oliver had owned the gym for 5 years, and Chloe had been going to the gym for 3 years. Oliver knew from the cars that dropped her off, from the platinum membership card that she owned, from the classy as shit water bottle that she owned, that Chloe came from money, and he told his brother this. Jack, however, refused to be deterred by something as trivial as the financial gap between them. He turned up to the gym more than he used to, he offered to help Chloe whenever he saw a chance to, and in a little while, she noticed him. The thing was, Jack too, with his soft brown eyes and chestnut-colored hair, was a classically handsome gentleman. He was tall and broad and smiled a lot. In no time, Chloe got hooked on him too, and she asked him out. They had their first date in a beautiful, dimly lit restaurant located in the middle of town. The reservation was at 8 at night. Jack showed up by 7:30, and Chloe showed up 20 minutes past 8. She was dressed in a simple red dress, black strappy shoes, and held a black clutch. She did not apologize for arriving late. She simply sat down, smiled at Jack, and ordered for both of them. Jack should have been mad that she could not care less about keeping him waiting. He should have called her out for it, but maybe it was just because it was the first time he saw her in something other than her workout gear, with her jet black hair framing her oval-shaped face and her lips covered in bright red lipstick. Instead, he smiled back at her and let her order seafood for him, even though he knew that he did not fancy the meal. 6 months later, she got her dad to offer him a job in his architectural firm, and 2 years later, they were married. The entire cost of the wedding ceremony was covered by Chloe's family, and basically, all Jack had to do was wear a suit that was chosen by Leo, say his vows that was refined by Sophie, and put a ring that was chosen by Chloe on Chloe's finger. His brother and his best friend Lucas were his groomsmen. His grandmother was in the audience. Jack would say that he had struck gold when he met Chloe, but that would be a fallacy. Of course, he now had a stable, well-paying job. He had a sweet kid, but Chloe was a lot. She made up fights over the littlest, most inconsequential things. She rather chewed the strongest pair of jeans from Forever 21 than apologize when she was at fault. She would report the tiniest misunderstanding they had at home to her dad, who would then berate Jack the next day at work. She ran off every morning to the gym and left the duty of preparing and taking their kid to school as solely as Jack's responsibility. Jack could not even complain, because if he did, she would cry to her dad. He did not hate to take care of the kid. He just needed a little help some mornings, like today, when an unforeseen circumstance made him late for work. As soon as he got into the office building, the receptionist informed him that Mr. Fitzgerald wanted to see him in his office. Jack expected that, so he just made his way onto the top floor and went straight to the boss's office. The secretary, Miss Paloma, asked him to wait in a seat in the waiting area, and he did. Some 5 minutes later, he got called into the office, and he walked in. Mr. Fitzgerald was scribbling down on a notepad and ignored his presence, so he stood by the corner and waited for the man to finish whatever he was writing. When he finally did, he raised his head at Jack. Jack greeted him, and he ignored the greeting. "What time did you come into the office today, Jack?" He went straight to the point. "Some minutes after 8, sir," Jack answered. "What was the exact time?" He asked again. His head propped up on his hand, and his eyes looked directly at Jack. Jack wavered under his gaze. 10 minutes after 8. The man nodded vigorously. "So you came in late." "I'm sorry, sir," Jack began. I was unable to." He stopped talking when the older man raised a fleshy arm at him. Mr. Fitzgerald cleared his throat before he said, That is the fourth time this week that you've come in late. It is the 10th time this month. Are you testing my patience because you're married to my daughter?" "No, sir. I sincerely apologize for my unprofessional behavior," Jack replied. "Maybe I would believe you if you hadn't already said that to me, but you have. Yesterday, on Tuesday, and every other time before that. You apologize, but you still repeat your unethical behavior," the man in the position of authority said to the other one. Jack did not know what to say to that, so he stood quietly and waited for the punishment that he knew was surely about to be meted out to him. "To make sure that you know that this is a place of work and punctuality is of core value, I am suspending you. Get your suspension letter from the HR department in 20 minutes. Jack was not sure he was hearing right. He was suspended for being a few minutes late to work. The painful thing was that a lot of colleagues were tardier than him, but the CEO was not concerned about them. Maybe he did not even know about their lateness. Maybe he knew and didn't care. But what Jack knew for sure was that the man was being unfair to him, and that the punishment was not for being late to work. It was for the fight he had earlier in the week with Chloe, but he could not receive the punishment without a fight, especially when he had a huge meeting with the high-end prospective client the next day. "Pardon me, sir. I know that I'm in the wrong here, and I sincerely apologize, but you can't suspend me, not when I have a huge meeting tomorrow." The man turned to look at him again and said, "I know all about your meeting with Faye Richardson. I will let someone else handle it, and let the woman know that you lack a core professional skill. I am sure she would like someone who is proven to be punctual to handle her project after all." He could have pleaded, he could have groveled, but he knew that the man was set in his ways, and nothing he said would ever get him out of the suspension. So he asked, "How long is the suspension, sir?" Mr. Fitzgerald, who had gone back to scribbling, didn't even bother to look at him when he said, "I said you would get a letter from HR. Now leave my office." Jack turned to leave. When he reached the door and pulled it open, he heard his boss say, "Oh, and you better apologize to my daughter." For the first time since the whole father-daughter against husband dynamic started, Jack felt like crying. He was frustrated, tired, and felt like smashing a glass against a hard surface. He had worked hard to even get Miss Richardson to listen to him. Then he had to wait more than 2 months for her and her team to consider his proposal. When she finally agreed to allow him to pitch his idea for a new building, Mr. Fitzgerald had to go and take the whole thing from him because of a fight with Chloe. over something that was not even his fault. What happened was that Chloe had put the dishes in the sink and was about to wash them when her friend Dorothy texted her about Kim Kardashian and Kanye West's breakup. So she quickly dried up her hands and picked up her phone. There was no comfortable spot in the kitchen for her to sit, so she left and went to the living room so that she could read up on the comments on the Haiti room. She forgot about all the plates in the sink and the tap that she left on. There was a big bowl in the sink, and when the water from the tap filled the bowl, it poured into the sink, and from there to the countertop, and finally to the kitchen floor. Chloe was still laughing over the hilarious comments from different people on different gossip blogs, and Jack had come back from work to see the kitchen flooded. Of course, he was pissed. He asked her why she often behaved like a child, and he chided her for her negligence. Chloe, being Chloe, of course, refused to acknowledge her fault, and she yelled right back at him. Like a lot of other couples fight, the incident became a trigger for them, and they began to yell at themselves over stuff that they had ignored before. Chloe said she slept like a starfish and hit her numerous times in his sleep. He said she was insensitive. She said he was ungrateful. He said she was lazy. They name-called themselves until Liam woke up from his nap. Then, with a deathly glare, Jack left her in the living room and went into the bedroom to change into something more comfortable. When he came back out, Chloe was no longer in the living room. She left the house in anger, and Jack had to clean up all the messes that she caused yet again. And she settled for passive-aggressiveness. She ignored him every day. When he cooked, she set the table for just two, and she slept in the guest room. So was it fair that he was being punished for something that was entirely not his fault? He waited for 15 minutes before he went to the Human Resources Department to get his letter. He had been suspended for a week. He swallowed deeply, picked up his shoulder bag, and walked out of the office. He knew that if he went back home, he would meet Chloe there on the couch, tapping rapidly on her phone screen. She normally went to the gym in the mornings, spent about 2 hours there, came back home, and spent the whole day lounging about and messing around with her phone. Sometimes she went to the saloons, but she never went out to shop. She always preferred shopping online, and since she went to the salon 2 days ago, he knew that she would be at home today. When he parked his car in the garage and took the elevators up to their floor, he clenched his fist at his side. He was so mad, and he wanted to take it all out on Chloe. He didn't care if that would get him fired. He didn't care if it would get him arrested. He didn't care if it would get him sent to Mars. He had had enough with her and her family. They controlled him at every turn, and he didn't even get a say. Yes, he did not have a say right from the beginning. But then he thought that that was how Chloe was, particular about certain things. So when she asked about her elder brother Leo to go with him when he went to buy his wedding suit, he was not bothered. He loved the woman, and if wearing a suit that her brother picked out for their wedding would make her happy, then what was the big deal? When she asked him to give his vows to her sister to cross-check, he did. When she said that she wanted their bedroom to be painted pale pink, he did not complain. But how much more could a man take? His best friend, Lucas, had told him from the onset that the Fitzgeralds controlled him, and he asked him to reconsider his plan to marry Chloe. But Jack did not see what his friend talked about. To him, the family had always been in a position of authority and were used to handing out orders, and as such, they found it difficult to compromise with people. To him, it was their way of life, and since he loved Chloe, he had to learn to deal with it. He had warned Lucas to never speak of Chloe or her family in that manner again, or he could forget about attending their wedding. So Lucas instantly apologized and backed off. Now he could see exactly what Lucas talked about. Maybe all he needed was a rude awakening. Maybe one as rude as being suspended a day before a meeting with a potential client. He reached their apartment door, turned his key, and opened it with so much force that if there was anyone behind it, he would have broken the person's jaw. He was not ready for the sight that greeted him. On their couch, their white couch, the one picked out when they went shopping for furniture a week after their wedding, Chloe lay tangled in some sheets. Her black hair that he used to adore so much was all over the place. Her lips were swollen, and her eyes darted from the kitchen to the door 1,000 times a second. And Jack thought that she was going to go cross-eyed, but he didn't care if she went cross-eyed or not, especially when his brother stumbled out of the kitchen in nothing but a pair of black briefs. Jack felt his blood go cold at the sight. "Jay, it's not what you think," Oliver managed out through a stammer. Jack let out an inhuman laugh. "It's not what I think? Oh, so my brother is not having an affair with my wife? Well, yeah, but Chloe, Oliver could not seem to form a coherent sentence. How could he? He had just been caught in bed with not just anyone, but his brother's wife. Really, his brain was short-circuited. Jack tired of the gibberish his brother was spewing. turned to Chloe and asked, "How long has this been going on?" She was no longer on the couch, and instead she was standing on the side with the white sheet around her, and one hand pushed her hair back from her face. She answered, "A while." Jack shook his head so hard it was a wonder it didn't fall off. "Don't do that. Tell me exactly how long both of you have been having an affair behind my back. I want an exact timeline." True to character, she rolled her eyes before she responded, and when she did, she said, "I can't remember." But Jack could not be fooled anymore. He knew that she knew exactly how long she had been cheating on him, but he also knew that she would not tell him. So he turned to his brother. "Oliver, how long have you been sleeping with my wife behind my back?" He said it with so much vehemence it shook Oliver. But instead of answering the question he was asked, Oliver replied, "I'm sorry, Jack." Jack put his hand over his mouth and released a shaky breath. He said to Oliver, "Don't apologize to me. You're not sorry. If you were, you wouldn't have done something as despicable as this. So answer my question." Then Oliver answered him. He said that he had been having an affair with Chloe since the year they got married. Jack immediately delivered a punch to his throat. He groaned out loud, and Chloe, who had gone into the room to put on some clothes, rushed out back in a pair of joggers and a tank top, where her hair was in a messy bun atop her head, and her voice was screechy as she yelled at Jack. "Why did you hit him?" Jack did not respond to her question. He stood by the corner and watched his brother struggle to catch his breath. If it were a fight over something else, Oliver would have been back on his feet in no time, and Jack would have been on the floor. But Oliver knew that his brother had every right to be mad, so he just laid on the floor with tears as a result of the heavy punch in his eyes, and looked up at Jack. Chloe was by his side, asking him if he felt okay or if he wanted to drink water. Jack did not take it, so he stomped out the door and shut it behind him with a huge bang. Maybe curdled milk really did serve as a bad omen. 3 hours later, a gazillion apology texts from Oliver, none from Chloe, 100 consolation backpats from Lucas, and several glasses of martinis later, Jack stumbled back into the apartment. He fell face flat on the bed and slept late until next morning. When he woke up, Chloe was nowhere to be found, and so was Liam. He imagined that she took him to school, so he entered the bathroom and took a shower. His thoughts clouded him as the fog clouded the plexiglass that demarcated the bathroom from the bedroom. As much as it pained him to admit it, if Oliver and Chloe had been seeing themselves since the year they got married, that meant that there was a huge possibility that Liam was not his. So he hung around in fear and anger until Chloe got back. She came back bubbly, as if the previous day didn't happen. From her conversation, it was obvious that the person she was on the phone with was her friend Dorothy. She ignored Jack, sat down, and continued her conversation about the outfit that celebrity wore to the Met Gala. Jack waited for her until she was done with the phone call before he started to talk to her. He was remarkably cool than he had been the previous day. His eyes were not wide with astonishment, his fists were not clenched in anger, and his breaths were calmer. And he told her that he wanted a paternity test done on Liam. As expected, she said no. He said that it was needed, and that there was no way that he would ever believe that kid was his without a test result from a medical professional to prove it. Chloe was stupefied, as though his theory was far-fetched. She threatened to report him to her father. She said she would never subject her child to such a demeaning test. Jack reminded her that the test was not demeaning and was, in fact, the only hope he had at that point to know if Liam was his. Maybe it was the determination that flashed so terribly in his eyes. Maybe Chloe realized that she could no longer make him do her bidding with a simple click of her fingers. But she finally agreed to a paternity test, and Jack set it up with his doctor, Lucas's wife. They had the test done on their appointed date, and when the results came out a few days later, it was proven that Liam was not his biological child, but was in fact Oliver's. Jack felt his heart being ripped out of its cage. He could take any nonsense dished out to him by Chloe and her family, but not this. As much as he had been adamant on his stance on the test, he prayed fervently that the child should be his. He loved the boy way too much. They had a lot of happy memories together, and now the child was proven to be someone else's. Jack had held Liam's hand when he was a baby, kissed him, and taken him on vacations. Jack held him on nights when it stormed, and he was scared. He bought matching cardigans for both of them the previous Christmas, and now he was told that the boy was not his, that the boy was his brother's biological son. Peace became a stranger to Jack, and if Chloe was apologetic, she had a poor way of expressing it. She didn't apologize, and she didn't explain herself. Jack knew that he had to divorce her. He badly wanted to. Every morning when he saw her before she got ready for the gym, he felt a surge of anger rush up through his chest, and she kept on going to the gym to work out with Oliver. Jack didn't know if she was still seeing Oliver, and frankly, he didn't care. The only downside of divorcing Chloe was losing Liam. He was her biological child, and in the case of custody, her argument would hold more weight than his, not to mention that her family could easily afford the best lawyer in town. It was a battle he already lost from the start. In his confused state, of course, he considered remaining in the marriage just so that he could remain tethered to the boy. But Lucas advised him against it. He reminded him that from the start of the relationship, Chloe never treated him well. Lucas reminded him that she never took his happiness or concerns into consideration, and remaining in the marriage was going to do a lot more harm than good. He would remain unseen, and he would fight with Chloe every other day, causing Liam to be stuck in an abusive home. Lucas said if he cared about the kid, he would know that the best thing to do was leave. So he did. First, he quit his job. Then he moved out of the apartment and spent the weeks on Lucas's couch. After a while, he filed for divorce, and his lawyer served the papers to Chloe. Maybe she was advised by her family lawyers, but much to his joy, she didn't fight it. If she did, it would have dragged out long and hard, and being from the Fitzgerald family, the media would have been intrigued, and they would have had to dig up the whole issue, and maybe the issue of Liam's paternity would have been published on the tabloids. As soon as the divorce was finalized, Jack moved out of town. He needed a change of scenery to help clear his head. He needed to be out of the same town as the Fitzgeralds. So he took the chance and moved back to Nevada where he grew up to see his grandmother. Oliver had been calling and texting him nonstop. Jack continued to ignore him. He was not in the right headspace to deal with him, so he didn't even try. Maybe if the only issue was that he had been cheating with Jack's wife, Jack would have forgiven him already, or at least listened to what he had to say. But it was way more than that. Oliver cut him deep to his bones, and he had only begun to heal. In Spring Valley, his Nana was flourishing. She was strong and hardy and spent her days beating the shit out of everyone who was dumb enough to engage in a poker game with her. As soon as she saw Jack, she knew that there was something wrong with him, and she badgered him until he finally told her. But he did not tell her the whole story. As much as he hated Oliver at that point, he knew that telling her what he did would only cause pain to her. So he let out the vital detail that his brother was the biological father of the boy he had shown paternity care to for years. His Nana felt sorry for him, and she showed it to him. She handed over the keys to her house to him and asked him to stay there for as long as he needed. The first thing that Jack did was take much-needed alone time. He binge-watched TV shows and ate food delivered directly to his, or rather his Nana's, doorstep. He slept until the late hours of the morning and played video games until his fingers hurt. He spent time with himself, he recuperated, and finally he was bored of staying at home. So he went to the elderly nursing home to keep his grandma company. He brought flowers on his way there so that she could decorate her room with them. When she got there, as usual, she sat amongst a bunch of elderly people and was playing poker. She was winning. When she noticed her grandson, she excused herself from the lot and went with him to her room. He handed her the flowers that he brought for her, and she carelessly dropped them on a table. She asked him, "How are you doing, son?" Jack picked up the flowers and put them in the clear container on her table, and put some water in them before he answered, "Fine, I'm doing really fine. Thank you for letting me stay in your place again." She waved a hand of dismissal at him. "Oh, stop it." Jack and his brother grew up with their grandma. Their mom had left their father when Jack was 5 to party in Rio with a man she met at Best Buy. She never came back, and she never called. Their dad, a hard-working foreman, rolled up his sleeves and took care of the boys by himself. However, when he got hit by a pile of wood that was being lifted at a building site, he died on the spot. Their Nana was the only relative they had, the only hope. And even though she was already too old to raise 2 boys by herself, she took them in, clothed them, fed them, and over them. And over them. She was a bit eccentric, their Nana. In her house, she hung various talismans that she got from different places that she traveled to when she was younger. There was a beaded one from the western part of Africa, a Japanese ofuda, another one from China, which she said gave her luck, and there was various yin-yang symbols drawn on the walls. Honestly, all she needed was a rabbit's foot, and she could turn the place into a museum of talismans. She was weird, but she loved fiercely. The door to her room creaked open, and a nurse in blue scrubs walked in. Her hair was in a neat pile on her head, and she smiled brightly when she entered the room. His Nana introduced them, and she said hello to him. But when he stretched out his hand toward her, she turned back to his Nana. "Hello, Miss Smith. Are you ready for your drug today?" His Nana groaned, and the nurse laughed. Her laughter was soft, like the feel of a flower petal on the cheek. Jack liked it. "I don't like that drug. It's bitter," she complained. The nurse dropped her clipboard on the table next to the flower Jack had brought and walked to Miss Smith's side. She held her hands and checked her pulse. Then she asked her, "Do you know what I just did?" The woman withdrew her hand and said, "Of course I do. You just checked my pulse." The nurse nodded and picked up her clipboard. Then she handed it over to the elderly woman. "I trust you can read. Can you tell me what you understand from this write-up?" Miss Smith squinted her eyes at the board and tried to read what was written on it. Jack wondered where the nurse was going with that. After a short while, his grandmother glanced up back and said, "It's all a bunch of medical terms. I don't know what's what. Why?" The nurse nodded and dropped the clipboard back on the table. She said, "What is on the clipboard is a bunch of instructions on how to administer treatment to everyone in this nursing home this afternoon. I handed it over to you, and you could not decipher the head from tail. Does that tell you now that I know what I'm doing?" Miss Smith let out a little gasp and accused the nurse. "You are rude." The nurse chuckled and said, "No, I'm not. What I am is someone who wants to see you be strong and stay winning poker for a long time. Now, will you please let me administer your drugs?" She nodded, and the nurse gave her 2 pills. She took them painfully slow, and the nurse gave her a thumbs up when she was done. Then the nurse picked up her clipboard and requested to talk to Jack in the hallway. He followed her out and appreciated the tact and professionalism she used to get his Nana to take her drugs. When he appreciated her, he expected a thank you or maybe one of her sunny smiles. What he got instead was a cold response of, "I was only doing my job." He shook his head at her and replied, "No, that's not true. You were just supposed to administer the drug to her, but you did a whole lot more than that. You actually care about her. Thank you." He thought that the second compliment would at least make her smile. Instead, she gave him a cold, "Well, I like my patients, and I want to see them better. If coaxing them to take their drugs is what it takes, then I have no qualms about doing that. You would know that if you cared about anyone here." For the life of him, Jack did not see what made her have an ice-cold disposition toward him. It was the first time they were meeting, and he could not see what he had done within minutes of their meeting which annoyed her. And now she had gone ahead to give him an outright dig. "What's wrong with you?" She gave him an incredulous look. "Me? What's wrong with me? I should be asking you that question, Mr. Smith. When last did you see your grandmother? Do you know how she had been faring for the past few months? Why weren't you here when she had an attack 2 months ago?" The nurse immediately became the least of Jack's worries. His Nana had an attack 2 months ago? How could he have not known that? There was no way that he could have not known that. His Nana had only had his house line, and after he moved out of the house, he cut all connections to the line. Maybe the care facility called the house. Could it be that Chloe picked up the phone and said he had no longer lived there? Or maybe she said she would pass the message on and then proceeded to sit on it like the cold-hearted bitch she was. He was sure that Oliver got the message, and maybe he tried to pass it on, but could not because he was blocked. Either way, all he knew was that there was a break in the transmission of the message, which caused him to miss it. As he stood thinking about the various possible scenarios that caused him to miss the message, the nurse said, "Yeah, right," and began to walk away. She took 2 steps before she turned back and said, "Also, caring is a part of my job, an essential part." Jack could not sleep that night. A lot of thoughts plagued his mind. He could not even bring up the topic with his Nana because he didn't know how to. So he had just gone back in, kissed her jaw, and told her that he would come to visit soon. Jack had pushed the pain he felt from leaving Liam behind to the back of his mind. It was there, right next to where he kept the pain of losing his dad, of leaving his city, of being betrayed by his brother, and now he had to add to the one he felt for his Nana. The woman was hypertensive, and once in a while, she'd have an attack. But she had not had one in so long that he had begun to believe she was totally fine. Or maybe she had been having attacks and he was just not aware of the situation. Was he so caught up in a bad marriage and a nasty job that he forgot about his grandmother and what she needed? He pushed open his wallet. In it sat the cards that Lucas had handed over to him when he saw him off to the airport. Lucas had said that the counseling service was advised by his wife and that the psychologist came highly recommended. He had urged Jack to give it a try, and now it looked like he was going to. He pulled out of it and looked at it. Gravely written on it in glossed lettering was Ryan Shipman, psychologist. There was also an address and phone number. He called the number. 5 days later, after his second session with Dr. Shipman, Jack felt considerably lighter. He had confided in her and had finally talked about some of the things that bothered him to a professional. Until then, he didn't know how badly he needed someone to listen to him, but after 2 sessions of therapy, he felt better. He asked the doctor if he was wrong for leaving Liam behind, and she said she could not speak on that. But what she did say was that he had put himself second to everyone for a long time, and finally putting himself first was going to be good for him. The doctor also discerned that he felt awful because he was not available the last time his grandma was ill. He sent for Jack to work through that. He would first need to talk to his grandma about that, and that was his assignment. So, that morning in a pair of blue jeans and a black t-shirt, Jack stepped out of his Nana's house and made his way to the nursing home. He bought some flowers again. With his luck, the first person he saw at the care facility's entrance was the nurse that bit his head off the other day. He murmured a tiny hi as he walked past her. His Nana was elated to see him. This time, she took the flowers from him and put them in the container by herself. She did not put them in water. Then, she sat on her bed and patted the side next to her for him to join her. Before he did, he put water in the flower pot. She started talking animatedly about what happened since the last time he was over there. She said there was a new fellow they just brought into the nursing home. His name was Carl, and he had an old squishy face and dull brown eyes. He had the guts to challenge her to a poker game, and she won him. Too bad the hospital policy frowned upon setting up money for grabs in any game. She would have emptied his bank account. Jack laughed, and she did too. Then he said, "Nana, there is something I wanted to talk to you about." She indicated with a nod of her head that he could go on, and he did. He told her everything the nurse told him. He asked her why she did not tell him that she was sick. He apologized for not being there. When he was done, there were tears in her eyes. She edged closer to him and wiped them clean. Then he said, "I knew that you were getting divorced before you moved back to Nevada," she confessed. "Oliver told me." He sounded strangled about it, and he begged me not to tell you that I already knew. Jack was shocked, but he did not interrupt her. She went on. "I got sick about a week later. At first, it was just the light symptoms, fatigue, headaches, and stuff. As with the protocols, they wanted to inform you and Oliver of my condition, but I asked them to inform just Oliver, and they did. My condition deteriorated 2 days later, but it was not as bad as the other times. I promised to not even get nosebleeds. You can ask the nurses." Jack chuckled at the last part of her statement. She reached for his hands. "I really am okay. You don't need to worry about me. You may be okay, but don't tell me not to worry about you because I will," he told her. Her aged face lifted into a smile as she gazed at him. Just then, a knock sounded on the door. Mrs. Smith said the person could come in, and the nurse, the same one that bit off Jack's head, poked her head in. Miss Smith raised her hand, the one that was not connected to Jack's, and said, "I already took my dosage for today. You can ask the other nurse." The nurse laughed softly, and she shook her head as she said, "I know you have, Miss Smith." Then the woman dropped her hand and relaxed her posture. Jack chuckled, and the nurse glanced over at him before she faced her patient again and said, "I just wanted to see Mr. Smith out in the hallway if that's okay with you." His grandmother shrugged. "Sure, take all the time you need." The nurse turned to Jack. "Mr. Smith, could I talk to you for a moment?" Jack shrugged and stood up. When they were safely out of his grandmother's earshot, he said, "Want to bite my head off some more?" The woman grimaced at him and said, "That is actually what I want to talk to you about." Jack gestured for her to go ahead, and she did. "I am incredibly sorry about the way I spoke to you the other day. Yes, it stemmed from the same care I have for my patients, including your grandmother, but I should not have come at you like that. As a caretaker and a practical stranger to you, it was wrong, and I am sorry about that." It took Jack a moment before he said, "Okay, apology accepted." Then the woman rewarded him with one of her smiles that he liked so much and said, "I would like it if we could start over." Jack nodded. "Me too." She outstretched her right hand towards him. "I'm Maya." He took the hand. "Nice to meet you, Maya. I'm Jack." After that, Jack's visits to the nursing home became more frequent. He went over twice or thrice a week, and whenever he came across Maya, he would smile at her. Sometimes they had small talks, and little by little he got to know stuff about her. She was an only child of her parents. Her parents were both doctors, and they were both disappointed that she was not one as well. She loved her job, and she liked to take walks in the park. Her favorite season was fall, and she had never been to Las Vegas, even though it was very close to Spring Valley. Her best friend was an ex-boyfriend's cousin, and her ex-boyfriend was trashy. Those were all the stuff she said with her mouth, but Jack learned other stuff about her that she didn't say. For one, she liked to talk. She also liked Jellios, and she ate a scary amount in a day. A strand of her hair constantly fell in the bun she always put her hair in, and framed her face now and then, and she pushed it back without even realizing what she was doing. Her favorite color was blue. She only ever wore blue scrubs. Her pen was blue, her car was blue, and so was the scrunchie that she used to hold her hair back. One evening, as Jack was leaving the facility, an unsaved number called him. As soon as he picked it up, he knew who it was. Oliver. Oliver didn't waste any time before he began to apologize again, and Jack ended the call and blocked the number. His therapist had told him that what was done to him was painful and that he needed time before he could completely heal. And Jack was hell-bent on getting and thoroughly utilizing that time. He would get back to Oliver whenever he was ready. As he stood on the spot clutching his phone, Maya strutted out of the building. She had changed from her scrubs to a pair of jeans and a blue button-up. When she saw him, she walked towards him. He saw her walking towards him and he tried to put on a smile, but she already caught his sour face. She asked, "Who put you in a foul mood?" He said, "Nobody." So she shrugged and they walked out together. Outside, she asked if he wanted to take a walk and he answered positively, so they did. It was April, so the weather was pretty nice out, and they talked as they walked. Maya took hold of the conversation and told him funny stories from college. After a while, it got dark out and they got tired of walking, but still craved each other's company, so they sat on the steps of a closed boutique. They sat in silence and stared at the lively street and the night air swooshed around them. It took all of 2 minutes before Maya turned to him. "So are you going to tell me about what had you in a bad mood?" Jack smirked. He knew she had not let that go. She waited for him with expectant eyes and ears, so he said, "Are you sure you're ready? This may be the saddest story you have ever heard in a while." She answered, "I watch telenovelas, bring it on." So he did. He told her about Chloe, their early days, Oliver, Chloe's dad, and the client he lost because Mr. Fitzgerald valued a snotty daughter over his business. Liam crashing on Lucas's couch, leaving Boston, the therapist Lucas recommended for him, his grandma, everything. When he was done, all she said was, "Wow." He nodded. "Yeah, wow. It's like a telenovela show." He looked at her in astonishment. "Are you seriously comparing my life to one of your shows?" She caught herself with a laugh and raised her hands in apology. "Sorry, I couldn't help it. The whole thing is unreal." He shook his head in amusement. She was talking about unreal? He spent so many nights wishing that it was unreal. He still got hurt any time he thought of Liam, and that was why he found it difficult to forgive his brother. If he had divorced Chloe for any other reason, maybe he would have fought for custody or even visitation rights, but because Liam was not his biological son and he was divorcing their daughter, he knew that the Fitzgeralds would fight tooth and nail if he so much as sniffed in Liam's direction. Jack did not want to subject the boy to a long struggle for his custody. He didn't want to elongate his pain, stretch out his suffering, or inflict any on Liam. That was why he left without a fight. But now and then, he blamed himself for not fighting. Maybe he could have won. Weren't the jury made of flesh and blood like every other human? Maybe his lawyer would have appealed to their empathetic side, and he would have won if he had just fought. Everyone said he was not to be blamed for not fighting, but he was yet to fully believe that. "Well, there is a lot to unpack there," Maya began. "First, your ex-wife was a douche, a damn big one at that, and your brother was too. He messed up big time." Jack nodded. He agreed with everything she said, and she continued. "But it sounds to me as though you don't care about Chloe or her family. If anything, you seem relieved that they are no longer in your life. The only thing you regret is leaving the boy behind." Jack could only nod at her. She understood him so well, but she was not done. "And you blame yourself for leaving him. You seem to forget that you were in an almost impossible situation, and you did all that you could to leave. You damn well know that there's no way you could have left with the boy, so give yourself a chance to breathe. Be kinder to yourself and focus on yourself." Jack liked a lot of things about Maya, but what he admired most was her affinity for the truth. He had teased her several times that she should have worked in the justice system instead of the medical field, and right now, hearing those words from her mouth warmed him up more than anything. The woman did have a way with words. "Thank you, Maya," he told her quite truthfully. With a few sentences, she had made him feel better. Maybe he should get rid of Dr. Shipman and keep her as a therapist instead. She answered, "You are welcome." After a second, she asked, "Can I ask you something, though?" He nodded, so she said, "But how about your brother? Do you plan to ice him out forever? I mean, I don't know what you are going through or what you have gone through, but he is your brother, and he is trying to apologize. Maybe you should just hear him out." Jack knew that he was going to forgive his brother. He only needed time, so he told her, "I will hear him out when I'm ready." She nodded and said, Okay, whatever floats your boat." Then she asked him, "Can I ask you something again?" He smiled. "Yes, Maya, you can." So she said, "What are you doing to uplift yourself career-wise? I mean, I get that you have been through a lot and you are only beginning to pick yourself back up, but surely you need a source of income." He agreed. "I do, and I have been working on my resume. I just finished with it last week, and I started sending it out to various firms in the country." "In the country?" she asked. He nodded and answered, "Yes, in the country." "Oh, I thought you would want one in Nevada, or at least close to, so that you could easily see Pop in the nursing home whenever you felt like seeing your grandma. I thought about that too, but if I want a job now, I want a long-term job, and the possibility of finding one quickly is by spreading out my search. But wherever I go, I would pop in to see my Nana more than I did previously, that I know for sure. Maya stood up and dusted the bottom of her jeans. He imitated her. Then she began to walk down the stairs, and he followed her. She said her house was not far from where they were, and they could walk there. So they did. When she stretched out her arms for a goodnight hug, he engulfed her in his arms. She was so small and soft and smelled like flowers. He did all he could not to sniff her neck like a maniac. When he released her, she smiled up at him and said goodnight. That night, he slept like a baby. The next day, he had an appointment with his therapist. He woke up some minutes past 8, ate a quick breakfast of toast and apple juice, then strolled around the town until it was time for his appointment. During his session, he talked to the doctor about the conversation that he had the previous day with Maya. He talked about a bunch of other things, but they all led back to her, and the doctor asked him how he felt about her. He could not answer coherently, so his doctor said it was him the assignment of the week, to understand how he felt about Maya Sanders. The thing was, he already knew how he felt about her. He liked her. He wanted to take her out on a date. He wanted to kiss her, but he did not know if she felt the same way for him, and being the only friend he had in Nevada, he did not want to make a move and make it weird if she was not interested. So he kept his feelings to himself. When he left Dr. Shipman's office, he bought a bouquet of roses and took them to the nursing home for his Nana. He handed them over to her, and she said, "Honestly, you should bring these flowers to Maya and stop dumping them on me. They wither too quickly." Jack would have laughed at the last part of her statement, but he was still hooked on the first. He did not understand why everyone seemed to think that he had the hots for Maya. Was it that obvious? If he was, it was not his fault. The woman was gorgeous. She was smart and kind and had a soft aura that could draw even a Marvel villain in. And he liked to talk to her, a lot. Sometimes when he did not show up at the hospital, they texted a lot during the day, and Jack wondered how the head nurse had not confiscated her phone. "Why would I give flowers to Maya?" he asked. His Nana looked up from where she was pouring water into the flower vase and said, "You're kidding, right?" He frowned and shrugged. "I am not." She shook her head and dropped the water jug. Then she sat on her bed and patted the space next to her. Obediently, Jack took a seat too. You know, for someone who has always been smart at school, you are a dumb one when it comes to real life. Jack lightly tapped her hands. "Hey." She did not laugh. "I'm serious. From the onset, I knew that Fitzgerald girl was not good for you. Hell, the entire family was poison. Do you know they served me only salad at your wedding? While I saw that your ex-wife's sister with a plate of roasted rib, I swear, if it was not your wedding, I would have lost it." Jack chuckled and she went on. But I did not tell you that you could do better than her. I did not try to stop you from marrying her because I knew that if I did, it would have driven a bridge between us, and you still would have married her. Sometimes human beings have to experience a mistake to learn from it, and I'm sorry that yours scarred you so deeply, but that should not close your eyes to the next good thing right in front of you. Jack opened his mouth to talk, but she ignored it and continued. "And you are lucky. Some people get scarred from their mistakes, and they live with that scar until they die. But you healed so quickly, son. I'm even a bit jealous. And Maya is part of your healing journey, whether or not you believe it. Even when both of you did not know it, she was helping you. You came over to Nevada with such a gloomy spirit, and now you feel better. It shows in your eyes and your smiles. Maya put that smile there. And as the lucky bastard you are, she likes you as well. Don't be stupid, Jack. Ask her out." "She likes me?" he asked his Nana again. "Did I stutter?" she asked him in return. As if on cue, a knock sounded on the door, and Miss Smith gave the person permission to come in. It was Maya. She beamed at everyone in the room and administered the drugs to Miss Smith. Then she told her that Mr. Carl sent a message to her. When Miss Smith asked what it was, she said that he asked for a rematch. The poker master laughed heartily and said, "Nothing amuses me more than people who don't learn from their mistakes." Done with her job, Maya left the room. As she left, Jack's eyes followed her to the door, and when she turned back to look at his Nana, she smiled knowingly at him. She said, "Yes, she likes you. It's so obvious. Now, go ask her out." "I will. She's busy now. I will ask her out when she's done," Jack said. "You better," his grandma said as she hopped down from the bed and put on her shoes. "And where are you going?" he asked her. "To show Carl that a puppy does not squeak when a dog barks." Jack laughed. When she reached for the door and turned the knob, before she opened it, she turned to him and said, "Oh, and you better get Maya to accept to go out on a date with you. Then she can get these damn flowers." Jack chuckled and said, "Bringing flowers is sweet. Flowers decorate a room. What's wrong with that?" She rolled her eyes and opened the door. Oh, nothing. All the other kids bring their parents alcohol or some valuable stuff, and you bring me a flower to put in a vase. What am I supposed to do with that? As she stepped out, Jack called out at her, "You're not allowed to have alcohol." After she was gone, he sat in his thoughts for a while. Then he brought out his phone and searched for Oliver's contact. As he had been meaning to, he unblocked him and shot him a text. "Hey, can we talk?" Then he stood up and walked out to go find Maya. As he opened the door, he met her on the other side of it. She had been coming into the room too. "Oh, hey, I want to talk to your grandmother." Jack swallowed. "She's currently having a poker rematch with Mr. Carl, but I want to talk to you. Can we step into the room?" She raised her brows at him and murmured a tentative okay. Once they were inside and the door was shut, he began. "Maya, I came to Spring Valley a wreck, but a few months here and some moments with you got me better. I like you a lot. You make me feel things that I never thought I could feel. I guess what I'm saying is, go out with me, please, on a date." "Sure," she replied easily. "Sure?" he asked to confirm. She nodded. "Yeah, sure." Jack smiled as he took a step closer to her. "You like me too?" She was quick to defend herself. "I never said I did. I only agreed to go out on a date with you." His arm snaked around her waist. "You didn't have to say it. Your tone said it for you." Her hands found their way to his hair, and she smiled up at him. Jack had always known that she was beautiful, but at that moment up close and in his arms, her fingers caressing his scalp, she looked more beautiful than she ever looked. "I want to kiss you," he told her. "Ditto," she whispered. And slowly he bent his head over and captured her lips. Yes, coming to Spring Valley had been a good idea.